From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Hello, I'm Stephen Winick. This is the Library of Congress, and I'm here with a group called Newpoli, who perform music from southern Italy. I am the writer and editor in the American Folklife Center of the Library of Congress, and I'm trained as a folklorist. And we just presented Newpoli in concert in our Homegrown Concert series. So these are three members of the group Newpoli, and I'm going to ask each of you to say your name.
My name is Carmen Marsico.
My name is Angela Rossi.
My name is Bjorn Wennas.
And these are, as I said, three members of the group Newpoli who perform music from southern Italy. So let's begin with the question, how many members of the band are actually from southern Italy?
Three members, actually, yes. Three members are from the south of Italy, different parts. One is me, and I'm from Basilicata. My family is from Basilicata.
And then I'm from Naples, like my family is from Naples. And then there's Fabio Pirozzo.
Yeah, there is also from the lowest part of Lazio, which is southern part of Rome. So Terracina is actually the name of his town.
We should give a shout out to Dan, our band.
That's right.
Yeah, that's
because
true.
his grandfather is from Calabria.
Yes.
And as I always like to joke about it, he's from northern Italy, as you can tell.
Yeah, that's right.
The very north of it.
A region called Sweden.
Right. And so other members of the group are from other places, some American and some from Europe.
Yes, yeah, correct.
And so how did you come together as a group around Italian music?
That's a what should I? So we have had a change in personnel in the group throughout the years, but we met at Berklee College of Music, where we were all studying really modern music, jazz specifically, blues and other styles. And one day we all met at the library at Berklee, and we noticed that there was a wonderful international folk festival. They were holding it at the Berklee Performance Center, which is a really nice room at Berklee. And we noticed that Italy wasn't represented. So our pride came out.
Yeah, actually it hadn't been represented almost ever. Only once they did it, but it was done by Italian Americans, and they did not play folk music. They play, more like the jazz Italian.
Right.
And so we thought, well, we need to do it.
Yes, to bring, the real authentic music. And since, Carmen and I were both from the south of Italy, and we were exposed since we were really young to these styles, we just said, oh, we can we weren't doing it as a, before then as a profession or anything, but we said, well, we should try to prepare some music, and we submitted it. He was there, and we, they selected us, and so we performed, and we really enjoyed it, and we decided to make it something more serious and start a research at that point, to widen the repertoire and such.
That's a great story, but it also touches on something interesting, which is that in the U.S. you have movements around certain ethnic folk musics like Irish music and things like that, but Italian music doesn't seem to be as well represented, even though there's so many Italian Americans. Have you gotten a sense of why that is through your?
I have an opinion. I don't know if I have a sense, but I have an opinion. I think that that some older generations, I think now is a little bit better. We are progressing, but in the first immigration, especially, people were really, Italian immigrants were very afraid of not integrating properly with the culture, with the American culture, especially their kids, their children. Sometimes they wouldn't even teach them Italian. Yeah. So I think it might have something to do with that.
I think they were a little bit ashamed. I mean, they kind of repressed the.
There was a lot of racism towards
Yeah,
Italians.
exactly.
Coming in, so.
Because they couldn't really speak well English, so they kind of erase a little bit the
I think
tradition.
your opinion is probably correct.
Yeah, and now, now though, there is a really nice, we're so glad, because I feel like the newer generations, that are coming, the new migration, so to speak, they're more interested in keeping the tradition alive.
But
so.
I actually noticed that even Italian American, I'm receiving more like people, oh, this is amazing, I want to research more about my roots. So now, now it's been probably 5 years or so that Italian American are more interested in rediscovering the roots.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So your immigrant experience was coming here to be musicians.
Yeah.
And you kind of shifted the type of music that you play, though. So what was that like, coming to the United States to work as musicians or to learn as musicians?
Well, I guess we were a little bit lucky because we studied, all three of us studied at Berklee, where there was so much diversity. So it was fantastic, actually. It was really wonderful to hear different cultures and exploring different sounds and, become richer and richer as a musician, because you could, you really absorb all those influences. I really enjoy it, still enjoy it, actually. Even now,
And Bjorn,
I agree with what you said. No, I would say that one thing that I think that everybody that studied at Berklee experienced was that a lot of teachers there, they want you to go and look in your roots, and, see what you can bring. So I think that maybe like the shift towards playing folk music from back home was maybe not that big of a shift.
It wasn't that far-fetched. It's true.
true.
Because what you do is you're integrate. I totally relate to that, because you're integrated. You're studying the American styles of singing and playing, and but you're exposed to so many different things. And then what happens is that you start sort of going back to, what can I contribute? Yeah. What's my unique voice? And I think partly is that you are so far removed from your origins that you really can look with a sort of more like a neutral eye and see that that's very special. When you are there, maybe you don't appreciate it as much.
Yeah, right. So when you were there, were you mostly interested in American musical styles?
I would say, we all have our own, obviously. Yeah. So I really was drawn to jazz primarily, and blues, and some of the good rock, British rock and roll, and I'm not ashamed of it.
I was going to say it like you also like Metallica.
I loved Metallica. I would love Metallica, but I was classically trained,
right.
And even and so it's sort of an interesting background. A lot of Europeans have this, by the way, this exposure to all these they seem so opposite in a way, but they're not. It's all music, and so that's kind of where my influences were, if you can say that, at first. And then I kind of went towards the world music more and more as I was, exploring things.
Yeah.
Right. Was that true for you as well, Carmen?
I actually started, I was kind of trained classically for a little bit, but I kind of liked the R&B, the American R&B. And then I started being interested in jazz because I met this jazz British Egyptian singer that I played with Dizzy Gillespie for a little bit. They actually think they were lovers, I fell in love. I couldn't stop. But I have to say, even at that time, she was the one that maybe started to make me think a little bit, because she decided to record this famous song, A Night in Tunisia, in Egyptian instead of English. And I was like, wow. And then it wasn't really, swing. It was done with this really amazing African rhythm, and I was like so absorbed by that. I was like, I really like that. And then the next kind of step it was to discover Jobin. For me, it was a big discovery because I couldn't stop listening to them. I felt that that type of music was a little closer to how I felt music compared to just the swing, more natural for me. So, yeah, and then little by little, you know, when you start exploring the Brazilian styles, then the Latin style, the Cuban, and then you get to the Africa. It was kind of like going back to the roots like that. It was interesting.
Fabio, though, some Tamburello player, he did play folk music in Italy.
Right. He really pretty professionally the tambourine in Italy in several traditional groups before he came to Boston, where he also studied, you know, modern styles and jazz and
jazz.
And Bjorn,
what
was
about
your
you?
musical background?
My musical background is classical guitar. That's how I started. Then I quickly shifted to a lot of metal. So several hardcore groups that I played in back home, emo groups. But at some point I started playing jazz, and that's how I got over to Berklee College of Music. And then I met this wonderful lady.
But I want to say something about Bjorn. He always forgets to say. When we
we're married, you can tell.
There you go. There you go.
When we were looking for a guitar player, we first asked this Italian guy that was a jazz player, and he said, this is not what I really do. And then we were already dating, and he had played for me this amazing Swedish folk group, and I was like, wow, certain things are similar to how we embellished the music. And so when Angela and I asked him, and he said, oh yeah, I would love to. And I mean, he had this, I don't know, new eyes to look at the stuff, but at the same time, he had in his mind, even though he doesn't say, but I mean, Swedish like culture, like their folk tradition is so strong.
Yes.
Even if they don't maybe, you know, think so, but it's so part of them, the way they are.
The strings and the voice,
So
the
he
singing.
never had the
very
problem
strong.
to understand like the grooves or like, you know.
Pretty much all the arrangements and most of the original music that we were playing, I did. So the Swedish
He
eyes
had the right
on-
sensitivity.
So who was the Swedish group that you turned to?
Oh, Free Foot.
Oh, Free Foot, yeah.
You know them?
I do, yeah.
Unbelievable.
And you know, it's interesting. I was just thinking how all of us kind of came. We really came from studying jazz. What happens is it's such a free music. It's so freeing, and I think the improvisational element is a thing that makes you discover other interesting aspects of the music, and also, like she was saying, jazz had different components. You know, jazz is a sort of a general word, but there's the Latin, the Cuban. So you realize that what it is really the world music, the music of the world,
a lot of folk
flows into it. So there's a lot of folk in music, basically. So
another influence that people might hear in Newpoli, and you'll tell me if it's really there or if it's just a coincidence, is early music.
Yes.
Oh no, for sure.
Yeah. So how did that get integrated into?
Well, I mean, like when you listen to folk music in Italy, they are still using a lot of the same instrument, and I think that, you know, the crossover between the early music and the folk tradition there, it's not a big step. Two of our musicians in the group, Dan and Karen, the flute player and the violinist there, they're actually educated early musicians, and I think that one of the big reasons of why we pulled them into the band was 2 CDs ago we did a CD called Tempo Antico, where we did a lot of Renaissance music, but in more of a street folk way. And yeah.
Well, I actually want to say something about this. Yeah, because the thing is that in Naples, in the Renaissance time, of course, there was the educated early music and not educated early music. And so there's a bit, like discussion in books that talk about the fact that the same composer maybe perform the song in a certain way at the court, and then instead on the street he would do it with the folk musician, more like a completely, a little rough and a little more edgy. And I mean, they don't know exactly, of course, but there's one specific style that we did record in Tempo Antico. It was the Villanella alla Napolitana. And that was what when we did that, we said, okay, we want to present this way, because we are kind of thinking that probably on the streets they were playing the song like this. But in front of the king, it was more refined.
Moresca as well.
The Moresca,
another style, more carnivalesque style, and many sounds are involved. And that was our take was, because we heard a lot of this music, this material performed classically, really perfectly, with no
there was also
edge, not a lot of
couple of groups that tried to do it
in the other
folk
way.
So, and
should we mention maybe Nuova Compagnia de
Nuova Compagnia?
Exactly.
That was really almost like the other way, because they really even introduced the Nuova Compagnia. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
I've heard of them, yeah.
So they introduced some even electric instruments, and they definitely had a different take on more folk and more edgy.
Yeah, they were definitely a big influence when we started out doing this music. Absolutely.
Well, so then another group that I was familiar with growing up, because they're from New York City, was a group called I Giullari di Piazza, and I understand that you've interacted with them a little bit as well.
Well, not with the group per se, but with the guitarist, John La Barbera, who is a good friend of ours, and he actually played on two of our albums. Sorry. And he was definitely one person that I went to learn from, and when it came to playing the guitar patente, which he is a real master on, and yeah, but that's pretty much the extent of our collaboration. But John definitely taught us a lot, and was just always a supporter of the band.
Right.
A lot of interesting stories.
Yeah. Oh my God, he has some interesting stories. Get a bottle of wine and that guy.
Right.
He's traveled a lot, and
yeah, he was part of the awakening of the folk music, the southern Italian folk music
in the 70s.
In the 70s in Italy, and collaborated with a lot of those people there, and so playing with him was kind of like I'm playing jazz and I'm playing with Charlie Parker,
right?
Yeah.
Right. Well, one of the things that they had observed, that group and John in particular, was that because Italy was so important in the development of classical music, Italian folk styles and early music actually had organic similarities. Is that something that you've worked with as well?
Well, maybe when we did Tempo Antico, I think that we were thinking about that a lot. So that was the album that we used a lot of Renaissance music and tried to reimagine it in a more folk way.
Right.
But I think from our previous CD in Non Tovata and with the CD that we recorded now, we really wanted to turn a completely different page and write more of our own music and in the style, and also we wanted to look at the entire area of that's surrounding Italy and think about what kind of influences may or may not have come in that influenced the folk music there, and we wanted to like shine a light on, say, a particular Greek rhythm or a particular scale that we could trace back to something, and reimagine the folk music from those perspectives.
Mm-hmm. Besides also using the field recordings.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Some field recordings are more like, okay, you listen, it's a song, it's there, and you can take it and maybe decide to do an introduction and some sections in a certain way. But others are really there, like there's, like, I don't know, a woman singing the beginning of the song is like, oh, cool, and then she goes
out of tune,
completely out, and you're like, oh, she didn't really want to do that. So you have to imagine, but still there's material that you can use. One of the songs that we performed before, during the concert, Dan, the flute player, was talking about, it's a chant that has different variation, different, I guess, way to sing. It's really long too. We didn't do the whole thing. It's a little too long, but it's we collected this version close to Matera in Basilicata because at the time we thought, oh, we like this and it's close to how we feel it. But then later on I even discovered the same chant, like you could find a little more in the center of Italy.
Let's say the name of the...
Oh, it's called Fronni d'Alia, which means olive branches. Olive branches. Yeah. And it's sung with a slightly different dialect, because of course the dialect there is different. So, I don't know, it's like, as Bjorn said, we discover like this groove from Greece, but also I think the field recordings are like such a treasure, so that sometimes by listening to one of those things, we're like, oh, we could do this with this.
Right.
So where do you find the field recordings from southern Italy that you've used?
So I started researching online because being here, I couldn't go to Italy and in a library. But we have the archive of Santa Cecilia in Rome. That has all those recordings collected there. And some professor that teaches at different universities have done put together like a book for by the region. And so I bought the Basilicata book, even the Puglia, I think about Calabria too, And I mean, the Basilicata was very dear to me because it's my region. And actually, they say that was the first expedition, like going to Africa, done in Italy. And it was done in 1952 by those Diego Carpitella and Ernesto Di Martino in the south of Italy. And they specifically went to Basilicata because at the time was the most isolated region, and so they thought that thing would have been really untouched, and so they were really eager to record whatever was there.
And partly it is true. You feel that way when you hear those recordings, because see, I wasn't, my tradition was Neapolitan, and actually Carmen too, but she heard this music, but at first I feel like you were exposed also to mostly Neapolitan music, because it's the more famous one, right? Exactly. Even the canzone napoletana.
Yeah, that was a big tradition in my family, like yours.
But when she played this, recordings for me, it really sounded like something that had the elements of Greece, of some Arabic, Middle Eastern elements in the melodies, and
a lot of that.
There was microtones.
Even a lot. Just vocal techniques that is completely different. With we don't want to maybe go too specific, but trills that only happen in that region, specifically in that region.
Right.
And that was amazing.
Yeah, it was really interesting. Yeah.
So I want to invite you, because as you know, Diego Carpitella just soon after that collaborated with Alan Lomax and did other trips throughout Italy. And we have those field recordings here at the Library of Congress. So we're going to invite you back anytime you want to come.
We can't wait.
And we'll show you those, and you can listen to some more of the same kind of recordings. Yeah. So those are great. So, so let's talk a little bit about the instruments in the group, because some of them will be instruments that you know, our audiences might not be that familiar with. So, what about the bagpipes? Italian bagpipes.
Oh yeah.
Zampogna.
Yeah. It's actually going to. I did not know this until I went down to southern Italy. It is a huge tradition down there with bagpipes, and I don't think that a lot of people are aware of it. But it's funny because they basically turn a goat inside out, and smack some reeds on it, and play it.
Well, when you say it's a huge tradition, it makes me laugh because some of the bagpipes are so big that it looks like you're dancing with another person.
Amazing. The first time I really strongly experienced is what we were in Naples, Carmen and I, for Christmas, and it is in particular in Christmas time the shepherds, well, nowadays it's just bagpipe players. Yeah. But they come down dressed as shepherds and they play all these pastorales on the streets of Naples. So it's funny, you walk around and you pass a Gucci store and next to it is a guy with his bagpipe.
And usually the tradition is that the bagpiper is going to play with another musician that plays Caramella, with it, which is our Sean version. So they always go in pairs like that.
So it's a double reed, mouth-blown double reed.
Right.
Dan plays both.
Yeah.
And actually the Caramella comes from Napoli. Naples, and the bagpipe comes from,
La Zampogna?
From Alfonso Toscano that lives.
Oh, you're speaking about his instruments.
His instrument, but the Zampogna itself is an instrument.
It's been made by his artisan in Italy.
Part of the same, area, and they do the two, musicians. They go in Christmas time. Some people hire them to go to their apartment to play the novena, so to play this traditional Christmas music, and it's still happening. Christmas every year.
But you should talk about your
guitar. What about your
That's
guitars?
A very important instrument.
Yes, so I play a particular guitar called the Chitarra Patente, and I was mentioning John La Barbera before. He was definitely a person that helped me develop playing that. And so it is basically a Baroque guitar, but with steel strings and metal frets, and whereas the Baroque guitar has gut strings and gut frets. Right. But other than that, it is very much the same. It has something called re-entrant tuning. So as you drag your finger across the strings, it's got dee do do, and then it jumps up an octave again. But it's the same strings as you play a guitar, which is very confusing. That all of a sudden you jump up an octave. Anyway, I learned a bunch of different techniques, both from John and from another Chitarra Patente player in Italy, and it is particularly an instrument that you find in Calabria and in Gargano, in Puglia, and in Cilento, in Campania. So those are I would say probably the three areas that has the strongest tradition. So it's very much an instrument that's remained from history, until now.
It's really interesting because it gives it some of the early music feel, and yet it's a surviving aspect of folk tradition that a lot of people just don't know about. So.
Exactly. Yeah, it's outside of Italy, here in America, I don't know how many places. Me and John, and maybe
probably you too. Yes.
I would say it's probably a few other people that maybe doesn't. But I think him and I, we're the only ones that do it professionally.
Right. Interesting. And then there's another guitar player in the group. So let's talk about Yossi's.
Yeah. So Yossi, he plays a mandola. Beautiful mandola, actually, that I snapped up in Napoli from 1960. and he plays
The
oud and classical guitar. We both play classical guitar and mandola. The mandola and the guitar potente, they complement each other very much, like in the sound, with both double strings, but he has a little bit more body to it, so it's nice when he plays lines. I play arpeggiated part or strumming. But the oud in particular, I think that was one of the things when Jussi started in the band, that we really wanted to bring in his knowledge of music from the Middle East and the language that he spoke, because as I was mentioning before, when we were looking at the music from the southern Italy, we saw all these influences, and that was definitely one influence that we wanted to enhance and
make people aware of it.
Yeah,
make it shine in the music. And it's funny because Jussi always, I remember when we were talking to him about it, he said, well, let's be careful because I don't want to look like I'm appropriating anything from the Arab world. I'm just trying to make my contribution. I think we loved him just for that, just for that, approach of respect, because that's what we always try to have, towards the music.
Other than that, I think almost all the instruments are instruments that you find, and people know about the violin, etc., the bass.
Yeah.
The recorders, right?
But
The tambourine.
but I guess the most particular part in the music is what Fabi plays, the different tamburellos, and I don't know who it was that said it. It's very much the heartbeat of the music, and you want to hear that boom, 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 boom. Yeah, it gets you going. Lots of triplets.
Yeah, and he has several different ones for different, sounds.
He's a collectionist.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, you saw 3 here tonight. He has, I don't know,
right.
his girlfriend is crying at home.
And if you make him sit down sometimes and talk about his instruments and the tradition of the instruments, it's pretty amazing. We were giving a lecture recently in Arkansas, and they both talked about the instruments, and I learned things that I totally didn't know about the frame drums, the tambourines of Italy. And one major difference, for example, is there is a big tambourine that's called tamorra, that is used to play a certain style of music in Naples, the Tammuriata. And then other different tambourine, different sizes, are from different regions, and so areas.
Specialized for different techniques.
Yeah, like from Calabria, they have one. In Puglia, in Salento, they have another.
Right.
Yeah. How you throw them and things.
Yeah.
And different claves, different claves for different styles.
Yeah.
But today we we played different. There was a Calabrian rhythm, which is a certain clave with a tambourine.
Oh, I can say that clave.
Yeah.
Spacca, spacca Napoli, Napoli, spacca, spacca Napoli, Napoli, spacca, spacca Napoli, 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 Napoli. There you go.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Great.
Right.
So let's talk a little about arranging. So you've got all these great instruments. How do you decide what's going to be on any given?
Well, how do I decide? I don't know.
Well, you hear it.
Well, yeah, I would say, thank you. I would say I hear it quite often. For example, like when we do new songs that I've written, right? Then I try to write very much to everybody's strength as a player. And but if we, for example, like if we pick up on a field recording, and I have a skeleton basically, and sometimes a broken skeleton that you have to mend back together. I was like, did you mean to sing that? Is it supposed to be microphone in there, or is she out of tune?
What kind of harmony do you put under that?
Right. Yeah. So I would say, like, a lot of times I start out with a rhythm, and from the rhythm I get the idea of where we want to take it. I mean, like sometimes maybe we hear it immediately. Like, but if I don't hear it immediately, I would say like I often start out from some kind of rhythm, and I get the feeling for what kind of direction I want to go in. And
well, for example, if you think of, I mean, the first tarantella we did today, Lee, when we heard the field recording for that, there was a clapping going on in the background, and the tambourine, I think, was there? Maybe
no,
not?
there was only
only voice and the clapping.
Only voice and clapping.
So, and you said, okay, that clapping has to stay. We need to keep it. That's very cool. And then, because the tarantella, it's not a tarantella if you don't have a tambourine, we needed to have that. And then we thought, well, let's do this slightly different. Let's do just the chitarra battente that goes together with the groove and the clapping and the tambourine. And that's how it began.
I have to say something as an arranger. And I would say that probably other people that arrange this music contemporary, like for example, there's another group in Puglia, Canzoniere Greccanico Salentino, and they arrange there, Mauro Durante. So quite often, this music, the traditional tarantellas, we have 2 chords, right? We have a 1 chord, we have a 5 chord. Let's play that for 5 minutes now, like, and you have, as an arranger, you had to do something with that. So I have invented all kind of ways that you can possibly reimagine these 2 chords, turn them inside out, creating bass lines, using the parallel minors,
and then, I mean,
anything that you can think
sometimes
of.
there sneaks in maybe a little something different,
I mean,
right?
but
not always.
But not always, but quite often, you just have to think about like, what can I do with this,
Yeah.
And also another thing that I noticed, not always, because sometimes like the arrangements are perfect and pristine.
Thank you.
But I think sometimes is great when they're not, because then when we get to play, then we get more ideas. We get more ideas. We get some ideas, and he's thinking, oh, perhaps if you play this an octave higher, it's gonna give a different effect. Perhaps if a certain instrument, you get to see the potential of that instrument that maybe you didn't know about, and I think that's a really fun aspect of it when we come up with breaks and all the sudden, this would be a really good break, or
absolutely. They're not untouchables, my arrangements.
But it's interesting because it shows how your musical training is interacting with this tradition. So if you're inside the tradition, those limits are there, but you don't recognize them as limits that you can break or that you can play with. But if you come from outside and have this musical training, you recognize the limits for what they are and say, well, okay, so how are we going to deal with this 1/5
Yes.
issue? Yeah. So it's really interesting to hear you talk about that.
Yeah.
So great. So so one thing that we didn't mention that when we were talking about instruments is it might be interesting to people that you include an electric bass in the group. What was the reason behind that, or how do you use it?
Well, the reason for, I mean, that we're not going to take the credit for that, because there are a lot of bands in Italy does that.
We heard it.
I see.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think that we all wanted to have like a slightly more modern sound that we can. I mean, quite often we play clubs, and you want to have the power on
also
stage.
Outdoor festivals, for example, in Italy or Chicago. It's nice.
You need the bottom.
Right, you need the bottom sound, and I feel like sometimes it's a bridge to connect also to a younger audience that connects to that element that now is so popular, And
I mean, it really. I mean, in reality, we have to face the fact that we are in 2018, and like some stages, if you don't have that low end, you're really gonna lose.
It disappears.
Yeah, a little bit. But then other times we find ourselves, like in Kansas City, in the room.
In the room.
Yeah. Well, Jeff with the bass was there too with a small thing, but having just a little bit, yeah. Or sometimes we play in this little place in Boston that is a bookstore, and that we kept it really acoustic because, I mean, it would have been overpowering in the room. So I guess it's, you know, we needed that to make it, as we said, more modern. And
So I should mention that I first met the band in Kansas City in a very small hotel room at the Folk Alliance conference, so that's what was being alluded to there.
1:30 in the morning.
That's right. And they were playing a set for, you know, a few of us. It was pretty full, actually. In that
I
little
was
room, but-
surprised.
it feels like a blur now.
Yeah.
I was very surprised to see so many people just
I don't remember at all.
at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
Oh,
But-
we played one even later. We played one, I think, at like, what, 2:30?
Something like
3
that,
a.m.
between 2.
Yeah. And we
And
were like,
still people.
and we were like, nobody's gonna come here. And then like, by the end, it was like the room was packed.
Yeah. So the Folk Alliance International is an organization that promotes folk music, and they have these showcases every year.
Yeah.
And you guys showcased this past year. Had you been to a Folk Alliance?
No, that was the first time actually.
What was your
First
impression
time.
of it?
That was a shock.
It was so much fun, though.
Yeah, no, we had so much fun. It was
great.
amazing.
It was really great.
We applied to go back again this year.
Which will be in Canada, if I'm not.
Yeah.
If I'm
Yeah,
correct.
Montreal.
Yeah. And that brings up one more question, which is, you mentioned playing in Italy at festivals and playing here. Do you perceive a difference between playing in Italy versus playing for American audiences?
A little bit. I do. I do a little bit. You do feel that that's where the tradition belongs. Definitely. It's just the way that they all grew up with the music, and or it was just taught to them, especially the dance, because the element of the dance is very tied to some of this music that we play, and so that's the first thing you see. You see young people in Italy just
Going crazy.
dancing
like
the traditional dance, and but really with a lot of passion and knowledge, really, you know.
But sometimes they, you know,
So
well,
that's-
we played in the very south, but we play more in the center, where the tradition wasn't really the same than they had, but because anyway they are exposed, they could dance and know what to do. Sometimes maybe they don't, but they dance anyway. So yeah, I actually, lately, even here, I've been noticing that more people are aware of, or anyway, the Let It Be.
They
you know?
connect more with our. Yeah, it's true. Over the years, I agree. We saw a difference in welcoming a style that they're not used to, and just let themselves go and hear it, and maybe even dance. You know, maybe even.
Absolutely. Just do their own thing. That's what we usually say, because sometimes we have the chance to teach some of the dances. Sometimes there's no chances, and we say just feel free to dance, you know, as you wish. It's not like you know, ballet, so you can really improvise. Yeah.
So one last thing, I know that you've recorded 4 CDs, I think, and you're working on the 5th.
Yeah.
The first 3 were mostly traditional music of various kinds,
Correct.
and now you've moved into a process where you write a fair amount of the songs. So you're doing essentially original music in these styles. How is the experience different of doing your own songs in the styles that you became accustomed to as traditional?
Ooh, it's fun.
It's really fun. Yeah.
Yes.
It's been fun also, like, because we want to still write in the dialects. So the previous CD, we wrote a pizzica. And so I studied a little bit the melody of this other pizzica, and understanding like how do they, and try to think of the rhythm, and then we picked the theme, and I wrote it in some kind of dialect that because by singing and you hear, and then you start like kind of guessing what the word it will be, because it wasn't the dialect that I was
Was from
acquainted.
Puglia,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, I was from some part like Tigiano. Actually, no, wait. I thought of like doing it in the dialect from Salento, which is the area, the southern part of Apulia, and there are many dialects there. And I knew a friend that was from there, and then I said, so I'm going to write it, but then you have to correct it, and correct it in your dialect, and I will keep it like that. So I did it, and I found the dictionary, tried to, because the metric was very important, so I couldn't, and so then I sent it to him, and he said, oh, maybe this word is that. So it was a little collaboration. It was fantastic. We did that. Then we did it with Neapolitan, and for Neapolitan, it was much easier because she knows it very well. I definitely know a little bit more.
And we have our mamas.
Well, your dad at the time.
My dad.
And then your mom. And then we started writing also in the dialect from my parents, and then it was like a collaboration between me and my mom. Yeah. Like, so what? And then my mom would call her sisters, like, so maybe we should say like
friends.
that.
It's like all the friends were involved. No, it's
really,
like this.
Yeah, like, no, and, different opinions because it's not a set language anyway. Yeah. But it was wonderful to actually involve them and make this whole thing alive. It's really great.
And for this last album, which is done, and we're so happy because we just received our sample with the cover and everything, cover art, beautiful. And in this album, we definitely, try to be very creative with that, with the writing aspect, and and lyric-wise to try to. I just wanted to say something about the substance of the text sometimes. We try it now. We're really trying to talk about our personal experience and what we see. And we try to just express our thoughts through the music. So it's the text component is important too. So we talk about immigration, the way people are dealing with it, the way we see it dealt, and sometimes we don't agree, And
the new album is called Mediterranean, so it's very much about the crisis of migrants in across the Mediterranean Sea.
Interesting, yeah.
So how, the stories of these people that come, and leave everything behind, just like we did.
Right.
Well,
not really
maybe not just like we did, but
a lot of our ancestors. That's what I mean.
Okay,
not me. Me, yes, I went for better opportunities, but I wasn't, in despair. We weren't in despair. Yeah. We are very lucky migrants, but there's different levels of, and today.
Well, we actually talked also about our experience as immigrants, because, well, when you move somewhere else and you live far away, and when you go back, you feel kind of awkward, and people. I mean, I don't know, but like people call me the American, and I'm like. I'm still Italian, but because I've been living here for a long time. Yeah. So, I mean, we had a lot to say with this one. Yeah.
Well, it's also interesting because you're going back there with some traditional music from that region, but then also some songs that you've written in their dialects, and so there's this sort of strange combination of foreignness and belonging that's sort of natural to what you're doing. One thing I noticed is you did win an Independent Music Award for the most recent CD, but it was in the traditional world category, even though a lot of the songs are original. Do you have any feelings about that? I mean,
well,
I feel great.
You're happy? Yeah, that's what I figured too. I would be too.
I have a comment to say. 2 years ago, we played for this event, a small event. We actually played just me and Bjorn because she couldn't come, in Basilicata, in this little village, and they were giving some kind of recognition to people that had immigrated all over the world from the village, and they came back and they said, oh, you did this, whatever. And we were asked to sing, to play some songs, and we did some traditional and some of our stuff. And then I had a woman come and say, oh, this is beautiful, but I recognize some others I don't recognize, but her, like, oh, it's really great. So she didn't think that they were not traditional.
And she was from there.
And she was
so
from there. She just thought, I don't know that song, you know? And I was like, oh, this is really amazing.
It's like we're getting part of the standards now, that we have the tradition.
Yeah. And also, I can point to the last album was actually nominated in Italy as a part of like the traditional music prize that they give out there. And also there was a bunch of music journalists, particularly one, Ciro De Rosa, who he writes for Songlines, and he's from Naples, and I think. And he wrote some very interesting things about like how we take Southern Italian tradition, put it on its head, mess around a little bit with it, and come up with something new. And he liked that, you know. There's like, you know, because, you know, anytime you treat it as an object that you can,
a museum piece,
yeah,
right?
You can't touch it. You know, it has to be a living organism, and the fact that, you know, for example, Fabio, Carmen, and Angela, they went here and then they write music about it, you know, about their homeland and their experiences here in the tradition. It's all part of folk music.
So we don't mind to be called traditional or non-traditional.
Or foreigners.
Well, thank you so much. On that note, I think we can say we've talked a lot about your music, and we really hope to hear more of it in the future. And we were so happy that we had you here for a homegrown concert. And we'll meet again, especially when you come to hear our Alan Lomax recordings of Italian folk music.
Thank you.
Thank you
for having us.
Thank you.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.